That pile of rotting weeds is a blight on this community, and you have 72 hours to remove it. Or the fines will start at $500 a day. Mr. Garrison, we will place a lien on this pathetic excuse for a farm, so fast your head will spin. Karen, the self-appointed queen of the Whispering Pines Estates, Homeowners Association, stood on my side of the property line. Her floral print muumuu straining against the humid July air, a clipboard clutched to her chest like a holy shield. Her face was a mask of furious certainty, a blotchy, sunburnt canvas of pure entitlement. The pile of rotting weeds she was pointing a trembling, sausage-like finger at was, in fact, 3 dozen professionally stacked, tightly bound round bales of Tifton 85 hay. My primary feed supply for the winter, and more importantly, the very thing the county fire code required as a fire break. Between my agricultural land and the brand-new tinderbox houses of her pristine subdivision, I could see the tops of their identical beige roofs. Just over the crest of the hill, a neat row of monopoly houses, dropped into a world they didn't understand. She took a deep, theatrical breath, puffing out her chest. This is a fire hazard. An eyesore and a violation of covenants. Conditions and restrictions. Article 9, Section 4, Subsection B. Maintenance of undeveloped or adjacent lots. We have a standard to uphold. People paid millions for these homes, not for a view of your hobo ranch. This is the moment my quiet retirement ended and the war began. If you've ever had your own nightmare with a power-tripping HOA board, hit that subscribe button right now and tell me where you're watching from in the comments below. I want to hear your stories because, believe me, you are not alone now. Let me take you back to how this all started. It wasn't just about the hay. It was never just about the hay. It was about a promise I made to my grandfather 20 years ago, in a dusty corner of Afghanistan. A promise sealed over a crackling satellite phone call, while the sound of distant rotors beat against the thin canvas of my tent. He was dying, and the one thing he asked of me was to never let them pave over his legacy, to keep the 100 acres of rolling North Georgia, land he'd carved out of the wilderness, as a place of peace and purpose. He left it to me, his only grandson, a master sergeant in the Air Force with a penchant for fixing broken things. From C-13, 0 engines to, as it turned out, broken down horses after 22 years of service. I came home not to a parade, but to the quiet dignity of this land. I started a small, self-funded horse rescue, taking in the animals that had been forgotten, the ones with splintered spirits and weary bones, the rhythm of the work, the pre-dawn feedings, the mending of fences, the smell of fresh-cut hay, was a balm to a soul worn smooth by years of deployments and the disciplined chaos of military life. For 5 years, it was paradise. My nearest neighbor was a mile down the dirt road, and the only rules I followed were the ones dictated by the seasons and the needs of my animals. Then came the bulldozers on the adjacent 200-acre tract. A developer from Atlanta bought the land, and Whispering Pines Estates was born. They clear-cut ancient oaks, leveled the gentle hills, and packed in luxury homes so close together. You could pass a cup of sugar from window to window. They built right up to my fence line, a meticulously surveyed and long-established border that had separated my family's land from the wild for nearly a century. And with the houses came the HOA, and with the HOA came Karen. I'd seen her before driving her golf cart slowly along the fence. Her face pinched in disapproval as she surveyed my world. The rust-colored barn, the grazing horses, the sturdy but unpainted fences that had stood for 50 years. She saw decay where I saw history. She saw a mess where I saw life. And now she saw a violation, where the law itself had mandated a protection. She mistook my calm demeanor for weakness, my quiet life for passivity. That was the first of many mistakes she would make. The fine she handed me wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a declaration of war. The document itself was a masterpiece of bureaucratic intimidation, printed on thick, creamy letterhead, bearing the ostentatious Whispering Pines Estates logo. 2 intertwined pine trees that looked more like green daggers. The language was deliberately vague and menacing, citing clauses and subsections without providing the actual text. A classic tactic designed to overwhelm and confuse. It spoke of ongoing non-compliance, aesthetic degradation, and potential legal remedies, including foreclosure. The sheer audacity of threatening to foreclose on a property. That wasn't even part of her jurisdiction. A property that had been in my family since before the state had even paved the main highway was breathtaking. I folded the paper neatly. My movements slow and deliberate, a habit learned from years of handling sensitive equipment in volatile situations. Panic is a luxury you can't afford when you're 30,000 feet in the air with an engine on fire. And it's just as useless when you're facing a ground-level tyrant in a Momu Karen. I said, my voice even in low. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. Her eyes narrowed, surprised by my lack of immediate outrage. She was expecting a shouting match, a scene she could later recount to her board. As proof of my uncooperative and aggressive nature, I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction, however. I continued holding the fine between my thumb and forefinger. You seem to be operating under a significant misunderstanding of both county fire regulations and property law. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face before being immediately replaced by a fresh wave of indignation. There is no misunderstanding. I am the president of the board. I have spoken with our attorney. That pile, she jabbed her finger toward the hay again, is a nuisance and it has to go. I gave a slow, deliberate nod. I'll be responding to your board in a formal capacity. You have a good day now. I turned and walked back toward my barn, not giving her another look, feeling her furious gaze burning into my back. Inside, the familiar smell of leather and horse feed settled my nerves. I laid the violation notice on my workbench, right next to a bridle I was mending. This was her chosen battlefield paperwork. Rules and intimidation fine. I had spent over 2 decades in an organization that practically invented bureaucracy. She wanted a paper war. I would give her a library. My first call wasn't to a lawyer. It was to the county planning and zoning office. My second was to the office of the county fire marshal. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't complain about the HOA. I simply and calmly asked for documentation. Good morning, I said to the clerk at the fire marshal's office. I'm calling to request a copy of the fire code requirements for new residential developments built adjacent to designated agricultural lands, specifically regarding fire break and buffer zone mandates. There was a pause, some typing, and then a friendly voice on the other end. Ah, yes, the Wildland Urban Interface Code. Are you referring to the new Whispering Pines development? By any chance, the fact that he knew the name immediately was my first sign that this was a well-trodden path. That's the one I confirmed. We've had a few calls on that, he said with a sigh. The developer was required to submit a comprehensive fire mitigation plan. Part of that plan, in a condition of their permit, was maintaining a 50-foot defensible space between their structures and your property line, since your property is active agricultural. A stacked vegetative buffer, like hay bales, is actually one of the recommended and approved methods for fulfilling that requirement. On your side of the line, it serves to slow a ground fire. I felt a cold, clean wave of vindication wash over me. Would it be possible to get a copy of that permit condition and the relevant code section in writing? I asked, and would it be possible for an inspector to come out and officially document that my current hay storage complies with that mandate? The man on the phone, a deputy marshal named Miller, chuckled. Son, I'll do you one better. I'll write you a formal letter myself and have it notarized. We're tired of these HOA commandos, thinking their little neighborhood rules trump public safety laws. I can have it ready for you by tomorrow afternoon. This was the first brick in my wall of evidence. A foundation of cold, hard, undeniable fact. Karen had fired the first shot, but she had aimed it directly at her own foot, with Deputy Marshal Miller's promise of official documentation secured. My next step was to build my own case file, with the same meticulous precision I used to use for aircraft maintenance logs. Every bolt, every wire, every inspection had to be accounted for, creating an unbroken chain of evidence that could withstand any scrutiny. This was no different. I drove into town and bought a heavy-duty 3-ring binder, a pack of divider tabs and sheet protectors. Back at my workbench, I labeled the tabs. HOA Correspondence County Ordinances, Fire Marshal Communications, Property Surveys and Deeds, Photographic Evidence and Timeline. The first document I slid into a protector, was Karen's violation notice, a trophy of her arrogance. I then spent the next several hours in my small office, digging through the old metal file cabinet that had belonged to my grandfather. Inside, smelling of aged paper and cedar, was the history of my land. I found the original deed from 1948, the property survey from the last assessment in 1997, and the county zoning classification certificate, designating my 100 acres as agricultural residential. Each document was a golden ticket. Another piece of armor, I made high-quality copies of everything. The next morning, I took my digital camera and walked the entire length of the fence line. I shared with Whispering Pines. I took wide shots showing the hay bales, my fence, the 50-foot grassy buffer on their side, and then their houses looming just beyond. I took close UPS of the survey markers embedded in the ground, iron pins that had marked that boundary for decades. I took photos from the road, showing the clear distinction between my working farm and their manicured enclave. Every photo was time-stamped. I was building a narrative, a visual story that would leave no room for misinterpretation. By noon the next day, I was at the county government complex, a drab brick building that held the keys to my defense. I picked up the notarized letter from Deputy Marshal Miller. It was even better than I had hoped. It not only confirmed that my hay bales were a valid and compliant fire break, but also explicitly stated that any attempt to force the removal of this approved fire break buffer could be interpreted as a willful obstruction of a public safety mandate, and may subject the responsible parties to review by this office. It was a polite but firm bureaucratic threat, and it was aimed directly at Karen's clipboard. While I was there, I stopped by the zoning office and got a certified copy of the local Right to Farm Ordinance, a state law that protects established agricultural operations from nuisance lawsuits filed by new residential neighbors who move in next door and then complain about the normal sights, sounds, and smells of farming. It was a law written for this exact situation. My binder was getting heavy. It felt good armed with a fortress of facts. I sat down to compose my response. I didn't write an angry email or make a furious phone call. I drafted a formal business letter, addressed to the Whispering Pines Estates Board of Directors. Care of Karen, the tone was professional, dispassionate, and utterly unassailable. I began by acknowledging receipt of their notice of violation. Then, point by point, I dismantled their claims. Regarding your assertion that my hay storage constitutes a fire hazard, I wrote, please find enclosed Exhibit A, a notarized letter from the county fire marshal's office, which states that said hay bales are, in fact, a legally compliant and recommended fire break, essential for the protection of your own residents in the wildland. Urban interface. Regarding the claim that my property is in violation of your covenants, I continued, please find enclosed Exhibit B, a certified copy of my property deed and the official county zoning map, which clearly show that my parcel is not and has never been subject to the authority or regulations of the Whispering Pines Estates HOA. Furthermore, please see Exhibit C, a copy of the state's Right to Farm Act, which provides statutory protection for my ongoing agricultural activities. I concluded the letter by politely requesting that they immediately rescind the violation notice and all associated fines, and that they update their records to reflect the legal and jurisdictional boundaries. I trust this documentation will resolve the matter. I finished a sentence that was equal parts sincerity and veiled challenge. I made 3 copies of the entire package, one for my binder, one for my own records, and one to send. I drove to the post office and sent the package via certified mail with return receipt. Requested the little green card when it came back with a signature. Would be irrefutable proof that they had received and been made aware of the facts. The ball was now in her court. I had responded not with emotion, but with overwhelming documented bureaucratic force. I had followed the rules, the real ones. I fully expected a grudging letter of apology, or more likely, just silence as the issue was quietly dropped. I had underestimated the boundless depths of her ego. A week later, the mail carrier's truck rumbled down my long gravel driveway and deposited another crisp, cream-colored envelope in my mailbox. The return address was Whispering Pines Estates. My certified mail receipt card had come back 2 days prior, bearing a spiky, illegible signature I assumed was Karen's. She had received my package This new letter was her answer. I opened it right there at the end of the drive, leaning against the warm metal of my truck. The letter was short, sharp, and dripping with contempt. It was from Karen, of course. Signed with her title, President. Board of Directors underlined twice, Mr. Garrison. It began, "We are in receipt of your recent correspondence and its various unverified attachments. The board has reviewed your claims and finds them to be without merit and irrelevant to the standards of our community. The HOA's legal counsel has advised us that your self-produced evidence does not supersede our established covenants." The sheer unmitigated gall of it almost made me laugh. She was calling a notarized letter from the Fire Marshal. In certified county documents, unverified attachments, she was doubling down, choosing to believe her own reality over the legal and physical one. The letter went on to inform me that because I had failed to comply with the original removal order, the initial fine of $500 had now been doubled to $1,000, and daily fines of $100 would now accrue until the nuisance was abated. The final paragraph was a masterstroke of pass.